Hello, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Kings Chat. ABC 10's Lina Washington and Sean Cunningham joining you virtually, of course, from our respective workplaces at the moment. We got a lot of Kings basketball to talk about, a lot to catch our viewers and audience up on. First being the Kings' most recent victory over the Boston Celtics last night at Golden One Center, 116-111, the final from that matchup. The Kings had a lead at halftime. They had a little bit of a struggle, I guess, in the first half, you would say. It was mainly Boston in control, but they were able to close it out with Tyrese Haliburton finishing with a career night in scoring. Another great performance from De'Aaron Fox, who's been on a tear as of late. And then Harrison Barnes, who continues to make his presence known as this team continues to inch closer to a 500 record, Sean.
Yeah, and winners of what, 5 of 6 now? I mean,
Yep.
It's a dark contrast compared to what we were talking just a few weeks ago and how they had lost 9 of 11. But you're right. I think something that really stood out, and Luke Walton touched on it in last night's game, which was the fight that his team showed. And granted, they didn't let that lead build to 20 like we've seen several times this year, where all of a sudden a team will go on a run and the Kings just can't match it. In fact, they just wilt. And that 10-point lead becomes 20 and the game's over. So it's been kind of encouraging to see this team respond the right way. I think last night was kind of a culmination of that road trip, because we saw glimpses of it on the road trip. We saw them respond well to physicality. We saw them, show like a team that gave a damn on the defensive end, and to show that fight and that grit and as Luke Walton put it, as survival mode. I think he hit it right on the head when he mentioned that, and I completely agree. And I think you can see that guys are starting to play with some pride. And you know what? I'm going to be honest. I know he doesn't play a ton of minutes, but I think Hassan Whiteside makes a huge difference on the defensive end for this team.
They are showing a lot of fight on the defensive end. I don't know how you felt watching last night's game, Sean, but there were moments where I looked up and it felt like Boston had gone on a run, but the Kings were still in it. And, it was within a 4-point margin for a lot of the fourth quarter until the Kings were able to pull away with their biggest lead of the game, which ended up being the end result, which was a 5-point victory. You mentioned Hassan Whiteside, but Marvin Bagley has been performing very well as of late. He got the first points of the night for Sacramento last night after a bit of a drought to start the game in terms of shooting. But I think the guy that we keep talking about is just how impressive Tyrese Haliburton has been in his first now 19 games of his NBA career. And of course, the NBA has recognized that by naming him Western Conference Rookie of the Month. LaMelo Ball with the Hornets earning the same honor in the East. But this is from a 17-game stretch where he averaged 11 points, I believe 5 assists and 3 rebounds, perhaps something around that ballpark per game. But I think it's just the way that we've seen him show so much poise in the final minutes in the fourth quarter, the amount of trust that Luke Walton has in him, and even the way that his teammates are talking about this kid, 20 years old. I think he's coming up on his 21st birthday here, maybe in the next couple of weeks even. But it has been really impressive to see his development and the way just he's carrying this responsibility, and of course the weight of going on almost 15, 16 years of a playoff drought. And he's focused on bringing this team to greatness once again. And he's just a couple games in, Sean. How impressed are you with this kid?
No, he's won them games. I mean, he's been really impressive. To see that from a rookie to be able to come in, have that much poise, and win them games. And last night was a direct example of that. I mean, when they went cold, you mentioned Marvin to start. I mean, Marvin kind of got them going in the game, scoring first, I think it was 7 of their first 10 points, and really kind of establishing a presence early. But that second bench, that grouping comes in, and they're able to kind of hold the rope and not let it go. Sometimes the offense tends to struggle, but he's one of the guys that really kind of gets that second group going. And it's nice to see. I know there's a ton of people that want to see Tyrese Haliburton inserted into the starting lineup. And to me, it doesn't matter. I mean, he comes in, he's impacting the game in a positive way. And for a team that really doesn't have a lot of playmaking ability, I like him with Corey Joseph, because Corey Joseph not only adds a defensive presence. I know he gets torched by fans because he does stuff that doesn't really show up in the in the box score, and he's not the greatest shooter, but I think he's having a pretty decent year shooting wise. I think Corey Joseph has been a good member of that second unit, and I think he's really plays well with Tyrese Haliburton. Tyrese Haliburton can play well with anybody, but when you already have De'Aaron Fox as a playmaker with that first unit, and then you have Tyrese Haliburton as a playmaker with Corey Joseph in that second unit, then you're finishing the game with a 3-guard rotation, which a lot of people are like, well, where's Marvin? Why isn't Marvin coming in? Because you're going to finish with Rashaan Holmes. You're going to finish with Harrison Barnes, and then the 3-guard lineup of Fox, Buddy Hield, and Haliburton. So I like what we've seen from that group. It's working right now. I mean, you don't mess with a winning streak. You kind of keep with what's going right now. And, look, Marvin understands. I think the only thing I would have done differently last night that I would have liked to see, if I already know that I'm going to roll with my 3-guard lineup with Harrison Barnes at the 4 and Rashaan Holmes at the 5, and Luke is strictly playing Marvin at the 4. He is not playing him as a center. So what I probably would have liked to have seen to possibly close the third, but definitely start the fourth, would have been Marvin Bagley with Hassan Whiteside and Haliburton on the floor to start. And then when Fox comes in, Haliburton comes out for a few minutes, and then they conclude with the 3-guard lineup. I think you need more scoring punch that way, but you're right, Lina, to finish that point, the Western Conference Player Rookie of the Month, most people kind of laugh at and say it's not a very big deal. It is a big deal, especially for this young team that's trying to make way, trying to find their way in the Western Conference. They put a lot of stock into Tyrese Haliburton. And to give you an example, De'Aaron Fox reminded people last night, he'd never been a Rookie of the Month. Neither had Marvin Bagley, by the way. And the last King to do so was Buddy Hield, the 25 games he played after the trade to Sacramento from New Orleans in the Demarcus Cousins deal. So I think it does mean a lot for his progress and his growth. And it's interesting because he came in and said, I want to be Rookie of the Year. I'm going to prove everybody wrong. But he also shows the poise that he has, because he's talked about not necessarily just a few weeks into the season, not really, paying much attention to these personal accolades. All he cares about is making the Kings win and returning them to the playoffs. And I think he's saying the right things. And I think that's super admirable right now.
Yeah, he's saying the right things. He's wearing the right things. He had the Reese's Passes hoodie on. That's shout out to Kings Herald for that merch. He had the Jason Williams tee, the vintage throwback, of course, and he already won Kings fans over when he talks so highly about that era, right, in Sacramento, already doing his research as a rookie. But I've loved watching Tyrese Haliburton, and you mentioned Rashaan Holmes playing together, and Rashaan has been glowing whenever he talks about playing with Tyrese. He loves playing with him. The way that they're able to create and find ways, even down to the final seconds of the shot clock to facilitate the ball, however it is. Tyrese is finding a way to do that. But you mentioned De'Aaron Fox, and there are some conversations that are happening where he is in the mix, or at least in the conversation of becoming an all-star in the West. And we saw the early voting release today. And we talked about this off the record, of course, between you and I. But I said on the same conversation a couple of weeks ago that it would be a successful season, I think, if De'Aaron Fox could be named an all-star. But of course, it is the gauntlet of the Western Conference at his position. But he has been playing out of his mind, particularly in the fourth quarter in a lot of these games. You mentioned the streak that they're on. They lost by 1 point in Miami in their 3-1 road trip on the East Coast swing. And De'Aaron Fox and Jimmy Butler went blow for blow in those final 5 minutes. And the way that he's been able to put his team on his back and even respond after that game, and the way that he took it upon himself to say, I need to sink my free throws. He went, I think, 7 of 7 the following game. I think he was perfect last night as well. And he's been able to match the moment, the energy, so to speak, walk the walk and talk the talk as the face of the franchise. What have you seen out of him so far?
Well, it's definitely growth. It's a confidence. I mean, we've talked about just how much bigger he is. Obviously, the speed is his elite asset. But to see him in that category and be talked amongst these other guards in being an all-star. Look, you're in Sacramento. Your team isn't that good right now. Your team hasn't been that good. Let's acknowledge that as well. It's going to, because record is so much of an emphasis and team success is so much of an emphasis in all-star voting, because it's not just coaches and media. Fans make up a huge amount of it. I mean, Klay Thompson, in the first string of ballot of the votes that have come out this early, he's 10th in guards right now, and he hasn't played all season. So it is a popularity contest. That being said, you have to do stuff that's just incredible. And right now it is a very small sample size. Granted, he's having a terrific year. I'm not trying to take away from that. I think it's a success to see his name among these guards in the West. He's not going to be an all-star. He won't, unless I think his best chance of being an all-star will be as a possibly injury replacement. And it's just so crowded. Lina, you mentioned it. I mean, even though James Harden and Russell Westbrook are gone, you still have guys like Steph Curry who came back this year. Klay Thompson's injured, so we can get that. But the shoo-ins, here's the shoo-ins, right? In my opinion, Steph Curry, Damian Lillard, Luka Doncic, right? I mean, those are the three that are just far and above beyond that going to be all-stars. After that, it's probably Devin Booker, although his numbers, I mean, his scoring numbers are there. Phoenix isn't that much better than Sacramento record-wise right now. So who knows what it looks like a few weeks from now. Okay, that's fine. No one's talking about Utah, and they're the best team in the West. So it's going to be either Donovan Mitchell. Mike Conley's having a sensational season. A lot of stuff he does that doesn't show up in the box score, much like Chris Paul, who, by the way, is putting up crazy assist numbers and scoring as well in Phoenix, and part of their massive turnaround. So will he get rewarded as a legacy type player? One of those guards in Utah is gonna make it. I just can't see it going any other way. Ja Morant is a very popular player. I don't think he's putting up numbers that are comparable to Fox right now. I think Fox is statistically better and is a little bit, he gets that edge. But look at the fan voting. Ja Morant was, I think, 4th in guards, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember right offhand, and we're not even talking about CJ McCollum. Now, granted, he's out right now, but he was 3rd in scoring. So he's still played something like 18 games, I believe. So CJ McCollum and to see him go backcourt with Damian Lillard. So where's Fox getting in? Where's Fox going to get in?
Yeah, I agree with you. Am in my optimism, I think he is one of those guys that's on the cusp, right? That's could be an injury replacement, and that's fine.
That's
but
a good thing. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Even to be in the conversation, right? I feel like he could have been in the conversation even last year without injuries, kind of hobbling him. But I know that you've said Marvin Bagley is probably your shoo-in for the next King to be represented in the All-Star game. But Rashaan Holmes, also a very popular player among Kings fans, and I feel like I've seen his presence on social media really pick up a notch in his recent performances.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Bagley comment, I made that as a rookie and as a first-year player. When he missed his second year, all but 13 games, I mean, that kind of disrupts that whole trajectory.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, it would probably shock me now to see Marvin Bagley make the All-Star team before De'Aaron Fox. So that's definitely changed. Rashaan Holmes, by the way, has been sensational, especially on the defensive end. I still think, again, it's a numbers thing. You have to have the numbers to go with it. And in the forwards in the West, I mean, where's he gonna get it? Jokic is crazy. Gobert is going to be rewarded for their success. So there's a lot of, again, Sacramento, if they can continue on, now granted they've won 5 of 6, if they can continue on and turn this team into a winning team or even at a 500 team, I think that will get them a lot closer. Look, we're talking about, and I'm doing off the top of my head, but I think Phoenix is 10-11 or 11-10 on the season. So, and Sacramento's 9-11, or no, 10-11, right?
10-11.
10-11. So, I mean, they're so close in terms of where they're at, and we're already talking about the Suns is like, oh, look at what Devin Booker's doing, and look what Chris Paul's doing. So, yeah, De'Aaron Fox will be in that group. I did write down something here I wanted to go to for Fox. I mean, now, granted, this goes for all guards, but in the entire West, he's 4th in assists and 4th in steals, and I believe he's 14th in scoring of all players. And in the West, and among point guards, he's 4th. So he's putting up numbers. Now, I kind of compare this a little bit to years ago with Damian Lillard. I mean, it took him 3 tries and he was putting up spectacular numbers, but Portland wasn't there. Same thing with Demarcus Cousins in the West, for a guy that was arguably the best big man in the league, putting up incredible numbers. The fact that they weren't winning was what kept him out for a couple of years. And then he was able, I think once he made it as an injury replacement, that's what kind of that's what basically made it, okay, yeah, he's an all-star, no matter what the team's success is, because he's still putting up these crazy numbers, getting all these double doubles. So when you're in Sacramento and you're a losing team, you've got to do something to buck the trend. And again, you can see it reflected in those fan votes, which is really the unfortunate thing, because the all-star game not only represents the best people in your league, but it's a popularity contest. Fans want it, they want to reward what fans want to see, and there's not a king among them, and that's sad, and that's something that they have to try to change. But I mean, look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, what they're doing in Oklahoma City, and granted they're terrible, but they're still making somewhat annoying. No one's anticipating them to do well, but he's putting up significant numbers. So yeah, De'Aaron, his numbers are definitely worthy. I think I'll say this. Shaq didn't do De'Aaron Fox any favors when he called out Donovan Mitchell, because that guy's on a tear since that conversation when he said he's not a superstar.
Right. Well, I mean, De'Aaron's a bit on a tear since he talked down on himself at the free throw line. So it's been great to see his development, his stepping up to the plate. Now they have Denver actually coming in to Sacramento on Saturday. They could go 3-0 against the Nuggets. Granted, they didn't have Jamal Murray in their last meeting, but they've been able to knock down this Western Conference contender in their 2 earlier meetings. And I don't think, again, anybody really anticipated it. Even the first win that went into overtime already kind of set the tone for this Cardiac Kings team that we've seen time and time again. But what do you anticipate from this matchup, or which kind of team do you think we're going to get on Saturday in an afternoon game, a matinee?
Oh yeah, I think that plays to the Kings' favor, especially having 2 days off. I think that's the one you're circling is you got to get, because for some reason the league makes you play in LA on Super Bowl Sunday at noon. Idiots. So ruining my day, our day.
Aaron Rodgers isn't playing, so Tyrese Haliburton doesn't even need to watch the game. So you got your rookie focused on Super Bowl Sunday for sure.
Unbelievable. I mean, I'll say this, and that's another guy. I mean, Denver's playing well. They hadn't obviously played that well against Sacramento, and we didn't even mention Jamal Murray, who started off the season terrible compared to what he was playing in the bubble. He's kind of turned it around a little bit. I think I actually wrote him down. I mean, he's up to almost 20 points a game now. Finally, player efficiency rating is still smaller than what De'Aaron is. So, yeah, I mean, Murray's getting it going, and they're going to reward. I mean, Jokic gets the reward for Denver's success, but do coaches look at Murray? I kind of hope that they look at Murray and go, no, you've been a kind of a disappointment, and they've won in spite of your absence. So, shoot, I think that game, the Kings have played super well. I think we're going to see a different Jamal Murray on Saturday. But I can't wait, because I love watching Jamal Murray and De'Aaron Fox go head-to-head. There's a lot of guys I like seeing Fox go head-to-head with. I think that was the matchup I enjoyed probably the most among most of the matchups last year that kind of came out of nowhere. Because as we've talked about in the offseason, De'Aaron was following that Jamal Murray trajectory, which was not that they were Kentucky, not that they were point guards, but a guy that was going into, will this team give him an extension? Because it's not that he deserves it. They need to. I mean, it's just the market value. And once Jamal Murray got it, I said, De'Aaron Fox, that's the next trajectory. His people are saying, this is what we have to do. And then Jamal Murray takes off. I mean, he soars last year, had a tremendous season, particularly in the bubble and in the playoffs, which was incredible. And I think De'Aaron Fox needs to follow that same trajectory. And I can't wait for Saturday. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Well, it certainly looks like De'Aaron Fox is well on that trajectory with his latest performances, barring any injury, of course. He should be on his way. It sounds like that he's been working. He had his his teammates saying that he's looking like an all-star in training camp. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. Did you, by the way,
agree with De'Aaron's assessment about it being stupid that there would be an all-star game? I agree too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Why are we doing this? No, I mean.
We know why. We know why.
Oh, it's not lost on anybody. You're trying to get the TV time and TNT and all of this stuff. We get it. Because, we're in the biz. But it's beyond me. And he, No, he's not one to mince words. I think he said the quiet part out loud that maybe some other players don't want to say, and he did make a good point. It's kind of that interesting double-edged sword, right? Where of course he wants to be an all-star. He'd be, thrilled to be named an all-star, but he thinks it's stupid to play because it's in the middle of a pandemic, and you're going to have all these guys from all these different markets who are not allowed to do all of these things in their own respective markets come together on their 5-day break on this grind that's been this season, right? We already know that they, cherish these days when it's not in the middle of a pandemic and a truncated campaign. And now they have this extra time that's so needed for their own mental health, not just physical health, right? But then you get fined if you don't show up, if you're healthy and you're good to go and you just say, no, I would like to err on the side of caution because it is a pandemic and I'm going to have to do all of these things to rejoin my team, perhaps if anybody gets potentially exposed in this game that's completely unnecessary and we were told wasn't going to happen in the first place. What did you think about his comment?
No, he was right on, and I think I think the average fan will hear that and go, "Oh my God, you just got paid you're about to get paid $100 and whatever $million, and you're already playing a season and you can't play one game." But what people don't get is and again, poor pampered athletes. I get it. But this year is so unlike most years. The day-to-day grind of them having to be tested every single day at like 7, 8 in the morning, coming in from their home. Then they have to pretty much stay there all day. If they practice, they get treatment, whatever. I'm just saying, I know people would go, oh, great, I'm out of a job. I mean, trying to compare it in the real world is just not, but just looking at it on its face value for what these guys are normally having to go through to what they're going through now. Look, everybody is affected in one way or the other. I get it. But again, in order to do this for a game that ultimately doesn't really mean anything, I think the only way I would be all for it is if you decide in that, and shoot, maybe this is part of how it'll end up being done. But you have to somehow find reasonable time for the all-stars that are participating in the event to have rest, play in this game, but also have rest, quarantine, play in this game, quarantine, get back with your team. So, I mean, you're talking about a 2-week period, basically. So if the league is willing to give NBA teams essentially 2 weeks off, I know some people might go, oh, that sounds great. Other people might go, well, what if you have a 6-game winning streak going in and all of a sudden you've lost that momentum? Well, that to me is the lesser problem to have. Allow teams to get healthy. You want a healthy product. I think that's the only way you can really do it. And if they do it that way, then I'm probably down for it. But if it's a 1 week off and you've got a 2-day quarantine, even with daily testing, and then all of a sudden you're back in the grind, like, to me, that isn't the right answer, and it doesn't make sense.
Do you look forward to the All-Star game, Sean? Do you watch it?
I do. Well, and here's why. I mean, the last few years, especially last year. I mean, come on.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Last year, it was the Kobe edge, right? It was everybody wanting to, I feel like, experience this moment of closure and celebration for Kobe and David Stern, who was lost earlier in the year. The year prior, we had a format switch up to make things exciting.
Right.
I feel like every year we're doing something, at least for the game element, to make it watchable or fun again. I'm a fan of the dunk contest. Sure, Saturday night is my thing. But in terms of the game, I don't see the value in that. I don't see why it's worth it, especially given this season and the circumstances that are taking over the headlines daily for the last year in our country.
I mean, I get it. I hear that. Yeah, the game. I will say the last few years, though, even with these change-ups that they've done, I think the league's vets, LeBron, Chris Paul, Carmelo Anthony, even though he's not an all-star anymore, but these guys have really put it upon themselves to try to make these all-star games mean something again, make them special again. They grew up watching, incredible all-star games in the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s. Like, why can't it be like that again? Once Jordan left and Kobe was, even when Kobe was in, we saw some silly all-star games. So, I mean, I would say Jordan was the last Jordan one was probably the last real competitive one until all of a sudden you got these last few years where they're trying different ways to make it a competitive game. I think they're doing it the right way. I like that the players are showing the the willingness to make this game mean something without it being something completely asinine like what baseball has done, where all of a sudden you're the winning team. Now that league gets home field advantage in the World Series. I'm not necessarily down with that, but baseball had to do something.
You think that's asinine?
I do. I mean, I understand.
To give these guys actually something to potentially play for?
I do, because you have a bunch of guys that ultimately are playing in a game, especially with the way the baseball all-star game is, where you have to have representation from every single team. And it could come down to somebody from the, and I'm just going to use this from an example, like, the Marlins maybe, or, I don't know. Baseball's,
Sure.
You got a lot of middle of the road teams right now, but I couldn't even tell you who's the crummiest team in baseball. I used to use crummy. That's amazing.
It used to be the Padres, but
the
look
Mariners,
at them now.
the Mariners. I mean, the
true.
Giants the past couple of years. I mean, why should they have a say in what happens in the Dodgers and Tampa Bay World Series? I mean, that's crazy. But
Sure.
I'm all for it because they're trying something. They're trying to make it work. Basketball made it. I mean, NBA's made it. You get player bonuses, you get money. I mean, you make it, put a charity on the line if you need to. There's incentive. Yeah, pay them. Pay them. And again, you still see people. Look, a lot of the older heads will get out there and even if they're not really wanting to play or get injured, maybe only play a few, and then you get the guys that it really means to. Maybe it's De'Aaron Fox coming in as a first timer, and all of a sudden he gets a stage to play on. I think it's great. I like the All-Star game a lot. I think the league is doing the right thing, because you're right, Lina. The All-Star game was bad for a while, and All-Star weekend was losing that luster. And I think, fortunately, for whatever reasons, even if they were awful, I think that it did the right thing for the game, and I want to see that carry on. I want to see how they follow that up, because I think we all agree these last two especially have been some of the best we've ever seen, and for a younger generation is probably the best they've ever seen.
Absolutely. I do agree that they've been worth tuning in for in these recent years. But again, the point is, you've already gone through all of these efforts to make it exciting when we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, where all of these players and coaches and their families are having to operate on a different level just to go to practice, be cleared to practice. I mean, you have guys that are getting contact tracing through whatever, and they can't even play for 2 weeks because they were around somebody who was in contact with somebody else who was positive. So, I wholeheartedly hear and agree with De'Aaron Fox's statements on that. But
he's right,
again,
though. If there was ever a year not to do it, this would be it.
This would be just maybe wait until maybe it's a, I don't know. I guess guys probably wouldn't be into it after the season ends.
I knew you were going to say that, and I thought, if not for the Olympics, which probably won't happen either. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe they will. But if not for the Olympics, then yeah, maybe it's something that's held in August. But how's that work with collective bargaining, free agency? I don't know.
Well, we also don't even know how the second half of the season is going to play out. We don't have a schedule yet, and we still have another month before the All-Star break. But as we mentioned, kind of in talking about how teams might get out of the flow of taking so much time off, that has seemingly been the case with the Kings. I feel like this time every year, Sean, again, this is my fourth season here, but the Kings are playing well. They're finally clicking. They're making the adjustments and not making the same mistakes. But then we head into the All-Star break or even the trade deadline, and something gets thrown off and they can't find their footing again. I mean, that's what happened when the season abruptly ended last year in March, and then they went to Orlando. They were one of the few teams that people were like, maybe you shouldn't go to Orlando. But they were also one of the more exciting teams at the time of the NBA suspension. And then, of course, we saw what happened in the bubble. They did not play well. The Suns obviously earned their badge of honor as being the team that deserved their plane ticket to to the wide world of sports. But I don't know how you feel about this, how this team was kind of trending before I got here, if this is a common theme from the last winless seasons. I'm curious what's going on here. What is it about this? Is it the flowers? Is it the city of trees? Is it the pollen? What is it about springtime?
It's what Rudy Gay referred to as basketball hell. When this team is got year after year after year after year after year of not making the playoffs, over a decade now. Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I laughed. I started to laugh when you mentioned about when you first got here because, it's just teams will make runs. Last year they made a run. They had a really awful start to last year, so I think people, when they were really starting to play well, might have bought too much into it. I was happy to see it, but I wasn't expecting much. I mean, last year's team I didn't expect anything from. I don't really expect much from this year's team, as you guys know. But if they can replicate that little streak that they had with a healthy Marvin Bagley, with a rookie like Tyrese Haliburton, who is a playmaker and has been unquestionably one of their biggest bright spots of the season, and a better De'Aaron Fox, a healthy De'Aaron Fox, because he was hobbled so much last year, you can kind of see the signs as how it could work. But again, over the course of a season, I just don't know that it will. My whole thing is, if this team can be like last year's team before things were abruptly shut down, and if they can just contend for the eighth, and with this play-in tournament and how that looks, those are playoff games. They may not be a playoff series, but these are playoff games. The last 2 years, they've essentially treated their last month as playoff games, and those are experience. Now, granted, you'll see some teams tend to shut it down a little bit, or you'll see some minutes for key guys that have already kind of clinched a playoff spot. That's fine, but that doesn't take away from what the Kings are trying to accomplish. So they treat them as must-win playoff games, and I think that experience alone is good. Now, granted, playoff experience would be something completely different, and I think that'll be its own thing. But the bubble was about as close as could it get to a playoff experience,
which is not promising if that's the case for what could come in a postseason.
No, and they wet the bed, so it didn't go well. But they needed that experience. I think it was good. So yeah, if they can get to what's working right now, somehow carry that over. Again, I cringe because it is a small sample size. I do like to take the way I like to go in groups of 10 and look at what's the last 10 look like, what's this 10 look like, so on and so forth. So the one thing that's puzzled me a bit, and I know there's no real home court advantage right now because there's no fans allowed in Sacramento. Some areas have fans, as we saw in Atlanta and LeBron James, and was that something? But I will say, the home court, at least at Golden One Center, for some reason with this team just hasn't been the most kind to them. They've got a lot of really tough losses on their home floor over the past few years. And for whatever reason, they seem to play better on the road. That is puzzling. I don't know why that is. And they did that. They had a huge stretch of home games, and you lose 9 of 11. Now you go on the road trip. Granted, you had 2 games in Memphis that were postponed, and you go 3-1. 1 game in Miami, which is decided by a point.
Right.
As Hassan Whiteside said last night, we should pretend like we've won the last 6. So now you've won 5 of 6, but here comes this crazy stretch again where you're I wrote it down, 6 of 7. You're 6 of your next 7 are at home, and the 1 road game is in LA on Super Bowl Sunday. So that worries me a bit, and you've got a lot of playoff caliber teams coming in. So as much as I said that this past road trip where they went 3-1 was going to be the telltale sign of the season before those games were suspended or postponed, I think this is now the biggest test on because the 5-game trip following the road, the homestand, that could become the next one if you're able to somehow go 500 or have a winning record going into that road trip. This to me is the next stretch of games where you look at and go, all right, is this the barometer? Is this what is the, what or get off the pot kind of thing?
Absolutely. It's going to be a really, really big test for this Sacramento team. I am interested to see how the rescheduling of games throughout the league is going to go. Obviously, we saw the Wizards missing, I don't even know, 2 weeks of action altogether. I'm curious to see how that's going to happen. And again, how we see the second half schedule roll out, how that plays out with, of course, the idea of wrapping up the season before the Olympics in mid-July, I think it was.
And I think, by the way, I've heard, I've heard little rumblings that we should know the second half of the season schedule. I think it's the week of Valentine's Day. So Valentine's Day is the 14th on Sunday. So I think that week, they should, either by the end of that week, they should know what the second half of the NBA schedule looks like.
Well, it's all kind of a learning experience, I think, for all of us. Every day, it's something happening in the NBA. Obviously, you mentioned the situation with the Atlanta Hawks, and the Phoenix Suns just announced that they will be welcoming fans, I believe, certain healthcare workers this weekend when the Celtics continue their road trip in Phoenix. As
Would it
a
would it surprise you to see fans in Golden One Center this year?
Based on Vivek's early comments with us, in terms of his confidence about navigating this, and what Golden One Center has done in terms of ventilation. And of course, they work so closely with local hospitals, healthcare providers, and workers, always on the cutting edge of innovation, technology, all of that. I would not be surprised to see fans. I think even if it is a select group of healthcare workers or first responders or vaccinated individuals, season ticket holders or something to that regard, a small group, even up in the suites. I feel like that would be something that we could see, even if it's not some in the lower bowl section with all the cardboard cutouts. But I think that teams are, of course, working day and night to figure out how they can get bodies back into the building safely. Do you think that we'll see fans in Golden One Center this season?
Yeah, I do. I was stalling there because my answer was very much like yours in terms of what Vivek said. That's always kind of stuck with me. I think if you had asked me a week ago, I would have said probably no. But seeing what California Governor Gavin Newsom has said about trying to get even high school back together, high school sports, and seeing what Santa Clara has done, knowing that they've got this state-of-the-art arena, I think it's feasible to get probably 5,000 people in there, maybe 2,500. I don't know if that's worth it. I know it's something. I think it becomes an incredible headache for a team that has a huge season ticket holder base, and then trying to say who gets to come and who can't. That's going to be a huge challenge. So I do think we'll see some progress there. I know that they're paying attention to the tiers, and I think, would they have to get down to orange? Maybe I don't know what that tiering structure would look like, but I do think we'll see fans at some point, and I just don't know what that looks like. But I do think at some point, and it'll probably be in the second half of the season, maybe the second half of the second half of the season. So I mean, we miss it. I know we definitely miss it. Just that environment in there.
Yeah, I mean, they do their best to kind of simulate the audience noise and the defense chants and the music and the DJ and Scott Moak on the mic and Scott Fresh on the Jumbotron.
And the DJ, they didn't have a DJ, but he was fantastic last game.
Whoever was on the playlist last night for the first game to usher in Black History Month, let's just say I appreciated it. It was like Sunday morning cleaning in the house with my parents, or driving and listening to the old school station in my car. I was with it. Not to knock, your Migos and Cardi B and all the Drakes and whatnot. I love that as well, but it was a nice change of pace.
I also like the fact that I think they're picking up on what I said earlier this year, and I'm going to take full credit for it, which was you got to play Wayman Tisdale once a game. I don't care where it is in the game, pregame, wherever. Just honor the late great Wayman Tisdale, who's one of the best players in the Sacramento era, and honor him by playing one of his songs. I mean, he's fantastic. And by the way, I know we're NBA talk, but the Super Bowl coming up, we're talking about fans. They're going to have 25,000 fans. That seems excessive.
It is Tampa and it is in Florida. And, they did win a Stanley Cup title not too long ago, and we saw how fans celebrated that in the streets with few masks. I can only imagine what I think is going to happen, and it's that Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski and Bruce Arians make history, not only being the first team to play in their home stadium in the Super Bowl, but to win at their home stadium. I'm a little concerned for what could happen in the Tampa area, but you mentioned fans being there. I follow some of what they call wags of these players.
As do I.
that's wife and girlfriends, for those of you who are unaware. But they're talking about how they can't leave the house and they're quarantining and they're testing and they've only seen nurses all day. Yes, that's exactly what should be happening. And you know what? You shouldn't be complaining about it, because your man is on his way to the Super Bowl and you want to make sure he's playing in the Super Bowl and not caught up in a barber's contact tracing situation, as we've seen happen with some of the Chiefs players. And I'm very, I'm excited for the football season to be over, in terms of having to deal with health and safety protocols. And I'm sure, you're the 49ers fan and we cover the team closely. I think Kyle Shanahan was ready for the season to be over, because it's just been one hoop after another test and all of that stuff. So to see the final game set to kick off in Tampa, again, I've got the Bucks. Sean, who do you got?
I'd love to be contrarian, and if I'm picking with my head or my heart, the head says Kansas City, but the heart goes Tampa, because I just can't imagine picking against Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. I mean, certainly we've seen him lose the Super Bowl, but
only like three times, four times.
Yeah, but I think he's got enough left. I mean, he's had a fantastic season. I think enough is going right for Tampa. I know Kansas City won their first matchup with them, so I think seeing a team twice there's always something special about that. So yeah, I'm going Tampa. I can't root against Tom. Tom Brady he's the GOAT. What are you going to do? I mean, maybe we'll be talking about saying that about Patrick Mahomes a few years from now, but it stands out that what Patrick Mahomes did in that second half of that Super Bowl was so impressive. But I still don't think he's there yet. I love his weapons. I love the offensive weapons that he's got. I think they're better than what Tom Brady has, but Tom Brady's made a career and a legacy of making dudes you never heard of into household names.
Yes, absolutely. And he is continuing his legacy in Tampa Bay. Again, I'm the Arizona girl. So what Bruce Arians was able to do for the Cardinals, I will forever hold him in high regard.
What is it? Risk it for the biscuit?
No risk it, no biscuit.
Okay.
I think he retired that since he got. I don't think Tom Brady's trying to risk anything. Okay, he won't even eat a strawberry. So do not ask him to do much other than what he does, which is be the GOAT, as you said.
Right.
But also with the staff that Bruce Arians has hired around him, Todd Bowles and all these coaches of color, these Black coaches, women, bringing them in to kind of get their footing in the NFL. And as we continue these conversations about equity in these positions, he's definitely been a champion in every spot that he's been at. So it's great to see him. Obviously, what Patrick Mahomes is doing as the new era of Black quarterbacks in the league, I think is incredible. I think just hearing the way that he and Tom Brady have been talking with each other and talking about each other of course they've met several times in the AFC Championship, but at this stage, I think is really kind of brings the human element to this game, right? To see kind of greatness, recognize greatness, maybe even sort of a passing of the torch, so to speak, even though Tom's not hanging him up, but he's watching, the comeuppance of this new style of quarterback who's already taken the league by storm in his early years. So it should be an exciting game. I can't help but be nostalgic and reminiscent of our time in Miami last year, covering the game and following the 49ers and their families, and such an amazing experience for those guys and their families to be at this stage. And for some of these guys to make their first postseason appearance and make it this far is just incredible.
It is. I can't wait for the game. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. And I think, man, you just brought up Miami and I remembered my last concert, and that's sad. So
yes, Lady Gaga. she
and Maroon 5 in the same night. That was incredible.
Maroon 5. Yes. Well, technically our last concert was the halftime show, which was Shakira and J-Lo. And now we have the weekend coming up and
7 million of his own dollars into this performance, and I'm not buying it. I don't believe that.
I guess he had time on his hands, since he's not thanking the Grammys for any awards or nominations. He just felt the need to do something with his
Yep.
life. So why not spend your own money on your own
Yeah.
halftime show for the biggest concert in the world, really?
I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yes. Well, the Kings will be playing at the time of the Super Bowl on Sunday, but first they have the Nuggets coming to town on Saturday. Again, they can go 3-0. They'll inch their way to 11-11 with a win over Denver on Saturday. But they're coming off this big win over the Nuggets. They're on the uptick. So we'll continue to bring you the latest as the Kings continue their season in this very strange time we're all navigating. As Sean Cunningham and Lina Washington come to you virtually, we'll bring you the latest next time here on Kings Talk.